Welcome to Adam's Athenaeum. Let's take a look together through the news and records of our times as we try to shed light upon the unvarnished truth. Thanks for coming back for this episode on fascism, an introduction. Donald Trump, Antifa, Fascist Italy, or Nazi Germany. What do these have in common? Many people will claim that all of these groups are fascist. I would agree with most people that 3 out of the 4 are. First, though, we should define fascism. According to Merriam-Webster's, fascism means a political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. A tendency toward or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. So what can we learn from this? First, it's a nationalist movement of sorts, with race being a matter of inferior and superior people. The government is centralized under a dictator, and the economic and social regimentation lead to forcible suppression of their opposition. According to Merriam-Webster's, regimentation derives from regiment, means a military unit consisting usually of a number of battalions, or governmental rule, to organize rigidly, especially for the sake of regulation or control, regiment an entire country, to subject to order or uniformity, to form into or assign to a regiment. So going back to where we were, economic and social governmental rule subject to order or uniformity will lead to forcible suppression of the opposition. Forcible suppression of the opposition could easily include silencing one political party on social media sites, alternative news media sites being defamed and sued out of existence before they gain any real traction, millions of Americans being treated as second-class citizens for not listening to unconstitutional health edicts and mandates. Fascist tactics are being used by Antifa during riots and protests, who illegally seized U.S. soil. Wait a second. Isn't all of this happening right now? But I swear that I heard for 4 solid years how fascist Trump was, how fascist white politicians and Americans are. And yet none of this happened by his administration. This is all happening by and under the Biden administration. I'm not going to stand up for Trump again. As many like me say, don't make me stand up for him again. I'm not a big fan of Trump. He did good things, but he wasn't a great president. Yet he was no fascist. I don't want to defend him, but I don't deal with lies or liars here. Obviously, my channel is based upon the truth, and I recognize the good and bad of Trump and his presidency. Can you say the same? So let's back up a little bit and ask, how do fascist powers come to rise and control governments? What are the common tactics used throughout history? First, we can look to Italy in the 1920s. According to OxfordReference.com, the events that led to Mussolini's seizure of power, on October 27th, the fascist movement mobilized and attempted to cut off all lines of communication to the capital in order to prepare for a march on Rome to seize power in a coup. Since they were no match for the regular Italian army, it was rather the threat of civil war in a country already torn apart by political factionalism which persuaded the government elites to accommodate the fascists when they learned of these plans. Since Mussolini declined to accept a subordinate part in a new government, on October 28th he was eventually offered the premiership. Mussolini's black shirt supporters were able to realize their march on Rome on October 29th, not as a prelude to, but as a celebration of their success. Therefore, Mussolini's seizure of power was founded not upon his own position of strength, but on the unwillingness of the political, economic, and social establishment to resist him, and on their hope that he might put an end to the perceived socialist threat. Now, this site doesn't mention that the actions taken by the black shirts on their march to Rome. The black shirts, or the militant arm of the Italian fascists, would loot, riot, and pillage entire neighborhoods, cities, and towns all across their march through Italy. Second, we can look back to Spain in the mid-1930s. Generals José Sanjurjo sorry if I messed that up, and Francisco Franco in Spanish Morocco led an unsuccessful coup against the Republic, and civil war began. According to OxfordReference.com, in 1937, Franco's nationalists overran the Basque region, which supported the Republicans in the hope of ultimate independence. Franco then divided the Republican forces by conquering territory between Barcelona and Valencia in 1938. The Republicans, weakened by internal intrigues and by the withdrawal of Soviet support, attempted a desperate counterattack. It failed, and Barcelona failed to Franco in January of 1939, quickly followed by Madrid. Franco became the head of the Spanish state, and the Falange was made the sole legal party. The Civil War inspired international support on both sides. The Soviet Union gave military supplies to the Republicans, while Italy and Germany supplied men to the nationalists. Bombing of civilians by German pilots and the destruction of the Basque town of Guernica, 1937, became the symbol of fascist ruthlessness and inspired one of Picasso's most famous paintings. As members of the international brigades, left-wing and communist volunteers from many countries fought for the Republican cause. The war cost about 750,000 Spanish lives. So in this example, we can see that a military coup took place, then outside forces began to dump supplies and support in for either side. Eventually, the fascists took over. In Spain, fascism survived from 1937 to 1950. And finally, let's look back to Nazi Germany. Many people forget that at that time, before Hitler rose to power, he waged a huge medical health campaign or health initiative trying to clean up the ghettos and lower income neighborhoods, which eventually helped his public image in his rise to power. As we have learned about Hitler since, he was extremely disgusted by bugs and what he considered to be disease or infection. This being why he usually referred to Jews as rats, cockroaches, or beetles. Most of the propaganda at the time also labeled Jews as the most disgusting bugs or insects you could think of. Now, Hitler's brown shirts were a similar military branch to Mussolini's black shirts. The brown shirts terrorized political opponents, destroyed local businesses who didn't support fascism, and beat people who were unworthy. From 1923 to 1932, Hitler tried to establish power and promote the Nazi Party as a political party. However, it wasn't until 1933 that Hitler was made Chancellor of Germany. Hitler allowed one more election shortly after this, in which the Nazi Party won a plurality of the votes, and that was the last time Adolf Hitler allowed a countrywide vote for a leader. Alright, those were very short introductions into how fascism came to power and some of the tactics used. Now let's compare them to today's society. BLM and Antifa in the summer of 2020 looted, robbed, burned, murdered, seized land, caused billions of dollars in damages, and what was it all for? You were told it was for reparations due to the white, racist society we live in. That is a lie. BLM and Antifa are the brown shirts, or the black shirt thugs of the far-left progressive Democratic Party. BLM and Antifa together go to political rallies to instigate fights and terrorize the opposition. BLM and Antifa beat people who do not submit to their ideology of Marxism or anarchism. Members of these groups will target individuals, expose their private identifying information, and try to destroy their lives. BLM and Antifa openly hate the media and try to silence any who might film their hateful actions. Whenever there is an election that could swing unfavorably for them, or a court case that could go against their narrative, they promise to come out to riot, burn, and cause bloodshed. I don't know if you remember from my video on the First Amendment, but threats of violence are illegal, and you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Yet recently, BLM leader Hawk Newsom said exactly this. So why isn't he being prosecuted? Oh, that's right. It's because he is correctly following the proposed narrative. So he gets a pass from the rest of the fascists who allow fascism. Now do you see how this works? For years, Trump, you and I have been labeled as fascists, Nazis, and white supremacists, when in fact, the Democratic left and progressives have gone so totalitarian it's now impossible to hide. Trump conceded his election. A fascist doesn't. Everything the left and the Democratic establishment has done over the last decade is to gain power and ignore the rule of law. So why is this video important today? It's important because too many people use big buzzwords to assault their political enemies when really, the people using the big words are the problem. If you know what projection is in psychology, and I'm no psychologist, but generally speaking, projection is when you put your own actions, guilt, and mindset onto someone else unrelated to the event. What do I mean? I'm trying to say that the same people who shout, "Punch a Nazi," "You're a fascist," "Trump's a fascist," are the literal fascists. They are too blind to see their actions in relation to history as being fascist. Antifa uses fascist tactics to enforce their ideology of anti-fascist. The race baiters like Al Sharpton of the world are the true racists. The Kathy Griffins of the world can behead Trump in a meme and say they have thought of ways to blow up the White House, yet they accuse you of being racist and hateful. I'm calling out the despotic military arm of the Democratic Party. Yes, BLM and Antifa, we know you are supported by, released from jail by, and your bail is paid for by Joe Biden's staff and Kamala Harris's. The true political fascism, my friends, is the Biden regime. And that's my opinion, YouTube. I've laid out the facts throughout history, I've shown you modern examples, and if I'm wrong, then I'll learn. But I'm still entitled to my opinion, especially when it's guided by facts, news, research, and knowledge. I'll go ahead and conclude by reminding everyone, peaceful talks bring great discourse. Truth, facts, and data make for a more lasting dialogue. And of course, if you have anything else to bring to the table, please drop it in the comments section. I look forward to seeing you there. Or leave a thumbs up if you like this video. My next episode will be on BLM, the corporation, an introduction. I hope to see you there.